Well, I think I learn daily from my clients in terms of, how they look at money and respect money. And, I try to bring some of those practices to my own life, especially when you see entrepreneurs from various different industries and, how they've created wealth or what they've done. I think you can learn from that and, apply that to your own life.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every single day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. I'm your host today, Brett Swarts. In every episode, we feature some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires. They share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with the insights we need to reach the next level of success, faith, and impact. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the Philadelphia area, and he is the chairman of Sterling Trustee, LLC, and oversees Sterling's vision and mission. He has spent over 15 years in the trust industry, operating expertise, and has led the growth of Sterling to over $10 billion of assets under administration. He is the co-founder and board member of Wealth Hub, a software application built on Salesforce to streamline trust administration. He's also the co-founder and former president of South Dakota Trust Association, and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Antony Joffe. Antony, how are we doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, sure. So Sterling Trustees is a South Dakota chartered trust company. We work with high net worth, ultra high net worth families around the world that are looking for an independent trustee to serve their families. Mainly comes about, entrepreneurial families that have created wealth, don't want to use family members or big bank trust company to serve as trustee and are looking for a boutique trust company that purely acts as a trustee to serve in that role so that there's no conflict of interest between us and, say, a bank that might be serving as a trustee.
Excellent. And before we dive into the topic today, which is the power of independent thinking, I do want to take one other step back, Antony. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given us to be blessing and help to others. So what would you say is Antony's, superpower or gifts that you were given, and how do you use those to bless people today?
Oh, it's a good question. I think, I think being in the trust industry, you need a bunch of combination of skills, obviously investment management skills, tax management skills, accounting management skills, legal management skills. But, I think at the end of the day, I'm really a high price psychiatrist. So I think it's really the ability to get inside a client's head, understand, where this wealth is created, how they want it to filter down to future generations, and what are the things or the obstacles that potentially get in the way from making that happen. So I think maybe my ability to maybe understand that and work with the families on more of a psychological plane, I guess maybe is the better way to a word to explain it, but it's that sort of just really understanding the family dynamics.
Thank you for sharing that, Anthony. That's very insightful and helpful. It sounds like multidimensional skills of helping people to get clear, get unstuck, and get going. And so let's dive into that, the power of independent thinking. So Anthony, what's the number one secret to getting clear for with the families that you're working with when they're working with an independent trustee like you?
Yep. Well, I think, as I said earlier, the reason, people seek us out is, I think, most people are familiar with big bank trust companies, take a Wilmington Trust or Northern Trust, where, they act as your trustee. They also manage your assets, and they also are the custodian of your assets. And you can imagine if they're doing a bad job managing the assets, unlikely the trustee side of the house is going to fire them and move those assets to Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or whatever. In our role, we purely act as a trustee, and so we eliminate that conflict of interest. We don't manage any assets ourselves. We allow the client to work with any financial advisor that they want, and then we'll oversee them, and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. If they're not performing, we'll fire them and we'll move the assets somewhere else. So we eliminate that, conflict of interest between an investment advisor and a trustee. The other thing that we eliminate is really what's called distribution bias, which is most trust companies work on a AUM fee basis. So, if the assets increase, they make more money. If assets go down, they make less money. And so when a client calls up a bank trust company and wants a distribution, they make you stand on your head, because if they distribute the money out, it lowers their AUM, which lowers their fees, which, is not good for the trust company, but, they're not looking out for the end client's best interest.
Got it. Okay. So the first one is eliminating the conflict of interest, right? By not commingling services all under one roof. And number two, it sounds like the distribution bias, having a flat fee approach versus a fee that it fluctuates with the AUM and the value of the trust. Is that a fair summary so far?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So we work on a fixed fee basis, which, eliminates that distribution bias. And, I'm not making the assets go up and down. I'm really providing a fixed administrative service as the trustee. Hopefully we're engaging, good financial advisors that, if they're worth their weight in gold, they're going to, hopefully increase the value of the trust assets, and, they should get paid accordingly. But we feel that we're really just providing a fixed administrative service, and therefore, shouldn't have to participate in that.
Awesome. By the way, you can learn more about Mr. Antony Joffe by going to sterlingtrustees.com, sterlingtrustees.com. So, Anthony, speaking of financial advisors, when you're vetting potential new ones or the ones that you're working with to make sure that they're continue to be, top at what they do, a company that has such a large, and great reputation that you guys have and a large amount of AUM, what is the process of vetting and understanding, great fits for the financial advisors to the clients?
Sure. No, we go through a pretty detailed process. I mean, obviously there's, you can go online and look at an RIA's ADV and all the stuff that's, stored on the SEC website. We have a pretty detailed questionnaire or due diligence questionnaire, I should say, that, we have the advisors fill out so that we can review that. We're obviously running broker checks and background checks to make sure that, nobody has any bad backgrounds and whatnot. So, once they pass that muster, we can then bring them onto the platform, get to know them. We'll see how they invest. We monitor them. And, typically, through a 3 to 5 year sort of investment cycle, you can kind of get a feel for whether or not, they know what they're doing.
Excellent. Okay. So it's a systematic process of a due diligence questionnaire, looking at their background checks, broker background checks, and criminal background, all background checks, right?
Yep.
And then also, it sounds like you give, maybe it's a tryout, if you will. I don't know, meaning like, let's watch you for 3 to 5 years to see how you perform. And if after that, then perhaps the introductions start to happen. And did I catch that right?
We'll bring on the financial advisor, and, typically we'll give them 3 to 5 years to perform. Listen, you could bring on a guy and, the market drops, 500 points the next day, and, you look at his performance and you're like, well, what the hell? But, I think 3 to 5 years is a more reasonable sort of economic cycle to be able to judge, how an advisor is doing.
Okay, excellent. Okay, great. So that's financial advisors. What about M&A advisors or business brokers or commercial real estate, brokers that are selling the very, large assets?
Yep. No, they're great referral sources for us as well. Typically we'll take an M&A advisor. I mean, they're sort of the first guys to really know of a transaction and, what, the liquidity event that's going to happen. And, with us being in South Dakota, there's a lot of, interesting things that, they could bring to bear in terms of, that we can bring to bear in terms of how we can help them. So, South Dakota has no state income tax or capital gains tax. So, anybody going through a transaction in a state that's got high state income tax or capital gains tax, if you can move the business into a trust in South Dakota, you potentially can eliminate, state income tax and capital gains tax on the transaction, which, for larger transactions gets to be a pretty meaningful number for families.
Excellent. Okay, so it sounds like you work with groups that set up the South Dakota Trust that can structure in a way where you can lower or eliminate some capital gains tax.
Yep, no, that's exactly right. And, a lot of people say, well, don't I have to live in South Dakota to be able to take advantage of that? And, the answer is no. I mean, that's the beauty of South Dakota trust law. There's other states that we compete with, Delaware, Nevada, Alaska, that also have pretty strong trust laws. But, South Dakota today, has more bank and trust assets than any other state in the country by a factor of 2. I think you can take Delaware, Nevada, Alaska, and some of these other states, add them all together, and you don't get to where South Dakota is. But
Okay. Can we walk
but
through an example of that? Because that sounds kind of interesting.
yeah, so let's just say you've got a family business and, getting ready to sell it for 10 million, and you haven't done any, financial planning or estate planning. You can use your lifetime gift exemption, for example. Every person has a $13 million lifetime gift exemption. They can take that exemption and contribute the shares of the company into a trust. And then you go through the sale transaction once that's been completed, and now you're in a position where you'll just pay capital gains tax at a federal level. You'll eliminate state capital gains tax in whatever state you're operating in, and you're off and running. And then
okay, so can we pause there? I want to see if I got that right. So let's say I live in California. I have a $10 million business. Let's just say it's an S corp, right? And so it has shares,
Yep.
and or C corp, and I have a zero basis, and I'm about to pay, let's say 37%, right? State, federal, Obamacare, right? So it's
Yep.
like 37%. So you're saying you can let's say, and I'm closing in 3 months, okay?
Yep.
And you're saying I can assign my shares to a South Dakota Trust.
Yep.
And then I could just sell it, and then I eliminate all of that state about say 13.3 is gone.
Yep. Yep.
California doesn't get paid. I still owe the 20 to the federal, right? So I'm still paying $2 million on that.
Yep.
What about the 3.8 like Obamacare? Am I still paying on that?
No, you're still paying that. The only thing I would say is, California is probably one of those states where it gets a little tricky. They have changed all their trust laws, and they've got their fangs into everything. So, if you've got California source income, the trust would be considered a California trust, and you would you'd be sort
but
of.
that kind of makes sense, right? Like if I'm in Silicon Valley and I was in California, I grew up in California, I started a business in California, I made all the money in California. If California has that tax, that would make sense, right? So let's move to another state. Let's say we go to New York or New Jersey, right?
Yep.
And it's all the same fact pattern. Am I able to be rid of New York or New Jersey because I did that? And I had 90 days to close kind of thing?
Yeah, no, New Jersey would probably work. New York's another state, unfortunately. New York and California are the two states that, I think with all the people that have fled the state, I think they're looking for alternative sources of income. And, trusts have been, one where they've been able to sort of get their claws into. And, it's a little trickier than, some of the other states in the country.
Okay, got it. But so New Jersey, that's a big one too, though. But New Jersey, we could do that. But you're saying the federal would still be there, the ACA, so you're still paying about 24%. Got it. Now, what about debt tax, Anthony? I think one of the biggest challenge for a lot of folks is, they have so much, and either they've gifted it all away, or they're running out of time, or running out of kids. They're and life insurance is really expensive. They don't necessarily want to give it all away to charity. And so they have let's say $1 billion exit coming up, right? And this massive estate tax challenge. Is there a way that you guys have found to eliminate that estate tax without any charity, life insurance, or gifting required?
It's tough. I mean, I think obviously their planning is key. I mean, if you're, take $1 billion exit on a technology company in California, for example, and you've got founder shares, smart guys are putting those founder shares into trust right away at, de minimis value, so that, when you do have that explosion in value, now all those assets are out of your state and protected from estate tax. There are opportunities with, like, say, a defective grantor trust where, you put all the assets into trust, the grantor pays the tax during their lifetime, but, on death, you're protected from potentially from estate tax. So there are techniques. GRATS is another one where people will, take appreciating stock, put that into GRATS, where, you can get some of the appreciation out of your estate. But it's tricky. I mean, the key is you got to plan early, and if you do that, you can really save yourself a lot of pain in the end run.
So we're talking with Antony Joffe, and by the way, you can go to sterlingtrustees.com, sterlingtrustees.com, and we're talking about the power of independent thinking, and we're talking through these strategies and these options and these things to be thinking about, so and having a trusted person like an Antony and his team to help you think through the options and do the planning. And I would also say maybe another way to think about the power of independent thinking is the power of intentional thinking, right? And proactive thinking, right? Yep. And you combine those with a group like yourself, Antony. It becomes an exponential way to be great stewards with the wealth, which is my next question, Antony. Like, when you think about stewardship, right, and helping others to be a great steward with this capital, with their family, mission, vision, values, with more than just the wealth piece, right, but the legacy, what comes to mind, and what are some key points of wisdom here that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've found, particularly with families, is how those family members, and particularly the kids of the entrepreneurs or the wealth creators, is what values have the kids been taught? If they have had values instilled in them at a young age and they appreciate and respect money, families tend to be able to create generational wealth that lasts for a long time and whatnot. I think when kids don't have any values, don't respect money, and you have this wealth creation event, you're in a situation where, you potentially stunt people's ambition, particularly the kids' ambition, to be able to go get a job, grow, and create their own wealth. And they sort of get used to, living on the wealth that's created by the entrepreneur sort of founder. So I think that's sort of the number one factor that, you need to look at as a trustee, is really trying to understand those values and how the beneficiaries potentially respect money.
Excellent. Now let's dive into that a little bit more. So what if the top, 1 or 2% of the families that you've worked with who have their kids, their Gen 1, 2, 3, kind of thing, what have they done to instill the healthy respect of money versus, either the fear, the scarcity, or the greed part of it that can take over? What have the best done to actually instill this in Gen 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, well, some families what they'll do is create milestones within the trust. Say, if you're a functioning member of society, you've got a job and you're earning XYZ dollars, and you use Quicken to take care of your finances every month and can prove that to a trustee, at that point would be willing to make distributions for, say, purchasing a down payment for a house, or maybe to purchase a business, or whatever it might be. So you can create milestones and those types of things into the trust document to, keep the kids honest and whatnot. The other thing to protect the kids is, make the trust discretionary, meaning any distributions that come out of the trust are purely at the discretion of the trustee. So if you get into a situation where, you've got a beneficiary coming back to you every other month saying, I need this, I need that, I need this, you've got the ability to say no. And, that potentially forces them to go get a job or start earning income some other way to, get their life back together and whatnot. So there's different things that you can do, to hopefully try to instill those values. A lot of it is, coaching on our part as the trustee, trying to give them hints and clues and advice on what to do to, get from A to B to, be functioning members of society. Sometimes the parents check out and, we become sort of the pseudo parents to a lot of these kids because, money does some strange things to people. It's amazing how screwed up family dynamics become with, the type of wealth that you're talking about.
So much wisdom right there. I want to pull out a couple pieces that you said there, right? Like down to the very practical, like quick end, like, okay, it's almost like a monthly audit. Like,
Yep.
how are you spending? And let's prove that out, right?
Yep.
Let's prove that out. So let's see that. And if you're doing a good job there, second, like create the milestones of accomplishment and of service, of giving, or whatever, income. And then also, I guess if it had a pendulum here, the far end would be everything is discretionary, and you've trusted a trustee company to, in a sense, kind of be that extra layer of parent when you're gone, right? Or steward with the capital. Help people through that, because it, especially if coach someone through that is saying, wow, that sounds, either, they might say restrictive or they might say harsh, but walk us through the other side of the pendulum where maybe it's, they respect the money, and they have a stewardship mindset, and the values have been in place. Would that discretion just maybe go halfway, or is there any point where there's no discretion, I guess is the question.
Well, I mean, some trusts will say, listen, I want you to clear out all the income of the trust every year to the beneficiaries. And, in a $1 billion trust, I mean, that's a large number, which, for some beneficiaries that are starting off their careers, I mean, there's not a whole lot of incentive there to, go find a job and whatnot. But on the flip side, listen, they might be good functioning members of society. They may respect money, and, they may take the tack that, listen, I want to devote my life to service and charity and use the money that I'm getting here to do better for the world. So, it can fall into different buckets. It's really a family by family sort of case study, and then a beneficiary by beneficiary type of thing. I mean, no two kids are the same, and it really sort of depends. It's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle, and
it really feels like it's dynamic, Anthony, right? It's not a one size fits all.
That's
I mean,
correct.
you have the emotional piece, you have the family legacy piece, you have the stewardship, that's kind of overarching part of it. You've got the scarcity and the abundance and the giving back, and it's the dynamics of this. What have you found for the families that you've worked with the best, that the money doesn't control? The money is the tool, right?
Yep.
The money is not the master. The money is a servant to be able to bless others. What have they done the best, besides maybe the common ones of the mission, vision, values being instilled in the kids? Is there anything else that you would say, yeah, they've really done these one or two things really well, and we wish everyone would know?
Ooh, that's a good question. Again, I hate to harken back to this, but I really just think it's a values driven thing, and if you respect money, it makes things so much easier for the kids and for the rest of the family members. They look at this wealth as a safety blanket that, wow, my dad or founder has created all this wealth for our family. Let's do good with it. I want to make sure that I can hand this down to my kids and my kids' kids, and sort of instilling that mindset is easier said than done. But I think the parents that sort of instill that in their kids are the ones that are the most successful. It really is a mental thing. There's a whole lot of psychology to this. I'm not sure there's any right or wrong way to do it. It's just it really becomes sort of teaching lessons from the parents, and at the end of the day, that's going to guide the rest of their life. And it's hard to change it from, once you get past, your teenage years, to be able to change those values and whatnot becomes, very, very difficult unless you're using sort of that sort of carrot stick approach, to change the behavior.
Oh, this is so good. I'm thinking, comes to mind is, the power of compounding interest. I think the power of compounding values that you have instilled and lived at the youngest of ages, and being very intentional about it. My wife and I, we have 5 children, and we're on our own journey to setting up our mission, vision, and values for our family, and the governance of the next gen. And we just picked out our 5 values. We picked out our family mission statement, our family vision statement, and we're having these discussions. Our oldest is just turned 14. Our youngest is 6. And it's just like we're having it every week now. And it's becoming a rhythm of our family. And I'm already seeing the values start to be lived out or at least thought about at this point. And our goal is to then help them to live it out and see how they can live it out. Right. And so I thank you for sharing that. And I encourage everyone who's listening that to do the same, right? As early as you can, because you're right. At a certain point, they say, I think 85% of our habits are formed by the time that we're 18.
Yep.
Right.
That's exactly right.
So now you're really the uphill battle. It's like, let's call it a going into debt. If you're not instilling these values, now you're 85% in debt on the other side. And so how do you carve out of that? Well, that debt is compounding as they get older too, right? If for the negative, or you've built it in and now it's compounding for the good. And so any thoughts on that, Anthony, or anything you would add or subtract?
Yeah, no, I think it's, things that you should be doing with your teenage kids in terms of instilling, values are, whether it's a job around the house or getting a paper route or scooping ice cream, whatever it might be, let them open up a checking account and see how interest accrues and those types of things. And, they want to buy a video game or whatnot, how to save for it and whatnot, so that they really learn to make intelligent decisions when they start spending their own money and see how it feels when they look at their bank account and it goes down by $30 after working, 40 hours to generate whatever they're getting paid per hour. But it's those types of things that, will instill, the value of money and not just relying on their parents to pay for everything and whatnot. I mean, it's just critical to, whether it's a babysitting job or whatever it might be, try to use the payment of funds as a carrot to learn those values.
Yeah. And I think also too, on the theme of the power of independent thinking, like teaching them to be independent in their thinking about money and stewardship and values, right? And you're instilling and you're coaching and you're teaching, and then you're passing the baton. And if if the work hasn't been done, then it's going to be very challenging for them to independently think, which if they lose that, and now they perhaps lose the wealth, right? Yep. Because they're not able to have the wisdom and discernment to be able to execute on such a massive, amount of wealth that can be crippling and or be a curse, right? Yep. If not pushed and directed in the correct way. Is that a fair summary, Anthony?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And, I think the other thing that probably builds up is sort of resentment if, we're the discretionary trustee and, we're not going to give them money because they're not meeting milestones or they're not spending money judiciously. There's probably resentment towards, their father or whoever the creator of the wealth is that, you've given a trustee this money and they won't give it to me. Like, what the hell's going on here? You made this money, like what, and they just don't understand it. And, right. I think that becomes frustrating for some beneficiaries as well.
Well, yeah, I think you're bringing to light what you were saying with the psychology part of it, and sometimes the parent, and then sometimes you're probably cheering them on and all these different things, and you're like, don't shoot the messenger. Like, mom and dad had a vision for this, and this is what they wanted, and this is what this is our stewardship of their legacy that we're helping to administer. And yeah, what a dynamic position, Anthony, that you and the team are in at Sterling Trustees. I wonder too about just the dynamics of change, right? Change in just the world, change in, geopolitical politics, change in even charitable giving, that mom and dad might have believed in this type of value, but the leadership changes in that particular charitable place with a whole nother leadership that flips upside down in 5 or 10 years. And mom and dad would never have supported that. So how do you work through those things that dynamic changes, that it's almost like something that is going to be outside on paper, but do you have the discretion to make some changes? Is that making some sense there? Yeah.
Again, I think some of that is, needs to be written into the trust document that, the trustee has flexibility to change. Let's say you set up a foundation and, you want all the money to go to XYZ charity. And over the years, maybe the charity is going a bad direction and, you feel like giving them money or making grants to that charity, you know, doesn't seem like in the best interest of the trust. Obviously, you want to be able to change course and whatnot. So, having that flexibility built into the trust document, needs to be put in there. And, if you're working with a good trust and estate attorney that, has seen sort of the stuff before and can build that flexibility in, that makes it easier.
Let's talk about practical application of this, because we just unraveled in the last 15 minutes so many if-thens, right? So I think one of the things that you guys offer is this what's called trust administration services, and making the best way to understand how to all these moving parts. So are you helping other trust companies do that too? Is that proprietary of what you guys just do, or just walk through how? I mean, there's probably at least 10 moving big parts that we just talked about. Like, how are you, what is the rhythm and the cadence of meeting with the family members, all of them together? Maybe just the trustee of, or the person who's helping to make the decisions, the families, maybe the team captain or the family trust captain. Like, walk us through that rhythm and that practical day to day or week to week or, year to year.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably the most exciting thing about the trust business is it is a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different skills and whatnot. I mean, you obviously have to have legal skills, accounting skills, investment skills, people skills and whatnot, and sort of bringing that all together to help the families. And typically, what we try to do is get together with the families on a quarterly basis. Typically, we'll do that with the investment advisor on the phone, reviewing the portfolio, understanding, what changes we want to make, and then also trying to understand, what's going on in the family's lives, what's changed over the last quarter or 6 months since we last talked in terms of, do we need to raise cash for, kid might be thinking about buying a house or putting down payment on a business or going to college or whatever it might be, having those quarterly calls, you start to really get to know the families and the dynamics and how the kids operate and whatnot. And bringing kids into the mix on those calls really helps them to understand the investment side of the equation and how that works. And again, maybe gives them a little more insight as to, how money compounds and, why you should respect it and so forth. So, so that's, one of the keys is trying to get everybody involved so that, you can teach and use it as a teaching moment on a good
Okay. I love it. That's so good. I love that. And then how do you guys do it though in a way that stays organized? I think you said something about Salesforce and connecting, like what's that? I'm just kind of curious. You got me curious on your solutions on how you guys administer stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, obviously, listen, as a trust company, you've got sort of two forms of risk. You've got regulatory risk that you've got to manage, and then you've got the fiduciary risk that you have to manage. And, if you don't bring technology to bear to, help you do that, I think you can get your ass handed to you pretty quickly in this business. So we built an application on Salesforce that sits on all of our trust officers' desktops that really automates all their day-to-day activities. So whether you're onboarding a trust, doing a distribution, investment review, all of that is done in the cloud. Approval processes are in the cloud and timestamps. So when our regulators come in, they can see exactly what we've done and when we did it. It also pulls in all the feeds from all the various custodians that we work with so we can monitor the underlying investment advisors and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So it allows us to be much more efficient. A lot of trust companies do this all by paper and, getting people to sign off on papers and whatnot. And, it's just an incredible waste of paper, but also an incredible waste of time and whatnot. I'd rather spend that time with our families, understanding what their issues are and problems are versus, shuffling papers back at the office.
God, I love that. Yeah, time is one thing that we can never get back once it's gone. Yep. And so we want to multiply time, freedom, and impact. I love that you have technology. I love that you have obviously track record, and I love that you have a heart for helping these families, right? And helping them to pass on and move the legacy forward. What a very rewarding position you must be in. What do you find most rewarding about, or anything that you would say to someone in your profession?
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think what I really like is the relationships that you develop with the families. There's so many different families. It's always interesting to see how they've created their wealth and and the values that they've instilled, and then working with them on a going forward basis to make sure that the next generation, continues to, respect that wealth and hopefully hand it down to the next generation after them. So, it's very dynamic. It changes every day. I mean, tax laws change, investments change. People used to be mutual funds. Now it's ETFs. Now you've got direct indexing. I mean, everything's changing, and then the tax side, things change. So there's just so many moving parts every day that makes it exciting.
Amazing, Anthony. We're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget make sure to tell yourself to do?
Ooh, save, particularly for college.
Perfect. That's good. Question number 2, number 1 book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
Probably Outlive by Peter Attia.
Excellent. For trustee books, what are maybe the top 2 or 3 books you've read for being a trustee?
Oh God, that's a good question. I have to look on my shelf here. There's a great book called Rich and Famous, which goes through a bunch of families and their struggle with wealth and whatnot, which is pretty interesting.
Cool, love it. What are you most curious about right now?
Curious to see what's going to happen in the next 4 years and with our political situation and how that's going to affect our industry. I think the other thing that I'm really curious about is AI, and again, how that's going to potentially affect our industry, and what we should be looking at now to hopefully make us more efficient by using it, and what efficiencies we can bring to bear using AI.
Perfect. What's the number 1 leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
I think it's probably do good by others. I think if you treat people with respect and do well for them, that hopefully they'll turn around and do the same thing for you. So I think
Love
that's
it.
right.
That's great. And the last question is kind of the theme of the podcast, right? Which is having a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership. And so what would you say is the top way that you maintain your core values and in a mindset of stewardship over ownership?
Well, I think I learn daily from my clients in terms of how they look at money and respect money, and I try to bring some of those practices to my own life. It's especially when you see entrepreneurs from various different industries and how they've created wealth or what they've done. I think you can learn from that and apply that to your own life. So that's what I try to do.
Anthony, it's been more than a pleasure to have you on the show. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom, your insight.
Sure.
I want to encourage you to keep using your multi-dimensional skills and the ability to understand and connect with families in a real way, authentic way, and that helps them to get clear, get unstuck, and get going on their next gen, passing of the wealth. Keep doing what you're doing. The 84 to 100 trillion transferring in the next 15 to 20 years. Yep. So you guys are going to be really busy. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, we remind them one last time, what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, probably the best is just go to our website, which is www.sterlingtrustees.com, or you can give me a call directly at 610-234-0626.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony, for being on the show. I also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Ability to Billions podcast. We're also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channel. And we're here to guide you, the successful entrepreneur and investor, on your journey from millions to billions. And we believe the key to scaling your wealth and compounding your impact starts with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more, all of it away to help MVPs. I'm your host, Brett Swarts, and I so appreciate everyone listening. Please take action today. Do not wait. Be encouraged, be challenged to instill the mission, vision, and values for your family, for your children, and to practice stewardship. It starts every day, that compounding effect. Appreciate everyone listening out there, and we'll talk to everyone again real soon. Bye now.